And could you check in your bags or your pockets for your driver's license? I have someone's driver's license with me. And if you have lost it and you look like the person in the picture, I'll be able to return it to you. So if you could check. Could I ask you to rise to welcome the President? They've been making the President run up all sorts of stairs, the lifts. I don't know what happened, but he is right here. No one's lost a driver's license. No, you don't look like the lady in the picture, definitely. I'm sure they wanted to take the photos. They were lining up. Okay. And if we could welcome the President with a loud round of applause, please. Welcome, Mr. President. And if I could ask you to remain standing while we're led in the rendition of the national anthem by the SABC band. The national anthem, and the gentlemen know what to do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Allow me to welcome all of you to this very important gathering. Two significant events taking place today. The first is the opening of this new Magistrates Court, the Booysens Magistrates Court, one of the special courts in our country. The second is commitment following the Gender Summit hosted by the President last year. And we welcome all distinguished delegates of the various organizations that led the call for the summit and participated in it. You are all most welcome. I also wish to welcome President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as my colleagues, Advocate Michael Masuta, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Tulas Nlesi, the Minister of Public Works, and the acting Premier of the province, Acting Premier MEC Panyaza Lusufi, who I shall now invite to deliver the formal welcome on behalf of Premier Makura. Acting Premier.
Thank you so much, Program Director. His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Shoulder to shoulder, side by side, as men and women of our country, we have gathered here today to take yet another important step in our ongoing endeavor to eliminate, permanently so, the scourge of gender-based violence. On this day, we are also opening officially so the state-of-the-art Booysens Magistrate Court as part of our government commitment in ensuring justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, it remains painful reality that during this time and era, as we are gathered here this morning, someone might be in pain. Someone might be attacked. Someone at the end of the day will be dead, purely because someone feels they have the right to harm others. On a daily basis, they are being violated. On a daily basis, they are being undermined. On a daily basis, they are being attacked. Our collective effort today and this morning is to send a strong word and a strong message. Enough, it's enough. It can't go beyond here. Through the Presidential Summit Declaration against Gender-Based Violence and Femicide that is going to be signed here together, is going to be signed here today. Together as society, as men and women, we are making a solemn pledge that will never rest until patriarchy and other related activities stop to become a defining moment in our society. On this special day, we are once again, with unbending will, denouncing gender-based violence and femicide. In one collective voice, we are saying gender-based violence and femicide must end, and it must end now. Never under our watch, and not in our names, shall the women of South Africa suffer the pain, the indignity, and the humiliation of gender-based violence and femicide. As we today renew our resolve to defeat gender-based violence, we are also extending a hand to all survivors of this scourge that is tearing our society apart. To the survivors, we say, remain strong. You are not alone. We are together and we will defeat this, and it won't last long. we stand with you, and feel free to speak out, because this government is more than willing now, not only to hear, but also to act. Walk away from those abusive relationships. A helping hand is being extended to you. You are all welcomed in the beautiful province of Gauteng. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, MEC Lesufi, the acting premier. I did not recognize my colleague, Minister Batabile Dlamini, the Minister for Women in the presidency. My apologies, I'm very bad on diplomacy. I should also recognize the MEC Nkosi Malovani. Thank you very much for being here with us. Before I call on Advocate Masuta, I should also indicate to the President that, Mr. President, just this week, I received a most horrifying open letter from female academics about sexual abuse and harassment within the university sector. It's something that we also must confront in our educational institutions. It's a most shocking letter to have received. Could I then call on the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Masuta, to come and address us on the purpose of the day. Minister.
Morning, everyone. And good morning, Mr. President. As part of the efforts of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development to broaden access to justice for all, a new magistrates court has been built at Oakdene, which is where we are, in the south of Johannesburg. The new court has, with effect from 1 March 2019, commenced to offer the community of Oakdene and surrounding suburbs a range of court services, which include family law services, that is maintenance, domestic violence, harassment, and children's court matters. Small claims courts services, civil and criminal services, which include fully fledged services of the sexual offences court, which the President had the pleasure of being introduced to this morning, are amongst the offerings that are provided at this court. I need to take the opportunity to explain the name of the court. You may well be aware that until around 2007 or 8, there was a branch called Booysens that was located adjacent to the Booysens police station. The facility became unsuitable for use and had to be closed down. And since that year, work was underway to plan and execute the construction of this beautiful facility. And we're pleased to report, and I do this also on behalf of the Minister of Public Works, that we have been able to complete this project within budget and within time. And that is within the 2 years that was set aside for the completion of this facility. It comprises 10 courtrooms, 2 of which are regional courtrooms, 1 of which is actually a dedicated special sexual offences court, and becomes the 84th since the launch of the rollout of special sexual offences court in 2013. So without further ado, let me seize this opportunity to once more express sincere appreciation for all present here to celebrate this wonderful development, and in particular to thank the President for making time to come and celebrate with us as he opens this beautiful court. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Masuta. I noticed that you didn't clap when the Minister said they finished this court on time and within budget. Well, I thought that you didn't clap because you don't have to applaud a fish for swimming, right? But nevertheless, it's nice to acknowledge now and again. Could I then invite the convener of the civil society representative groupings, Advocate Brenda Madumise, to address us.
Dumela, 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 Dumela. President Cyril Ramaphosa, Acting Premier Panyaza Lesufi, Minister Naledi Pando, Minister Batabile Dlamini, Minister Masuta, Advocate Batohi, and to the many women who marched on the 1st of August, the resilient, tireless fighters, I greet you and thank you for being here. Violence against women, and when I say women, I refer to all women, transgender, lesbians, gender non-conforming persons, and non-binary individuals. Violence against women is the ultimate denial of equality. Domestic violence is a social evil. Sexual harassment is not a joke. Rape is not a game. Law is not male. So, Mr. President, the prevalence and persistence of violence against women, together with widespread impunity of perpetrators, manifest a systemic structural problem linked to broader social, economic, and political distribution of power that vest authority and decision-making and belief in men. And that, for us, is discrimination. The ultimate entitlement of a woman to maintain the integrity of her own body, to choose how it is used and shared, should be sacrosanct. So when we marched on the 1st of August 2018 and eventually had a summit and finally the declaration that will be signed today, it was not a joke. It was because it's a lived reality of the many women in this country that they were saying to this government and to all of us that we have to stop the scourge of violence against women. And we can't continue to talk about it and not act. So it's good that we are opening a court, but we take it that the people appointed to this court and beyond are feminists, Mr. President. And they will emulate the values of feminism. Mr. President, this court and the many other courts should and will administer justice and deliver justice without delay. We have many cases that are sitting on your table, on your desks as minister and president that have not been attended to. So we don't have the luxury of time. So we want action, and we want action now. Let this court and the other courts vibrate at the feminist level. And Mr. President, in closing, you know us. You know that at all times we write and we protest. So we're going to continue to hold you accountable. We are going to continue to demand that resources are made available. So we want to see this court in the state that is in today, that it will remain in the next 10, 15, 20 years, because resources will be made available. Mr. President, and finally, we know, and I'm talking to all of us, that law transmits powerful messages about women and men. And that construct underpins our social relations. The gender of an accused or a victim makes a huge difference in assessing evidence in an offense of sexual offense. And that must be, and to those that will be responsible for the sexual offense, they need to appreciate that. That men and women look at sex differently and how messages are sent across. And when you are confronted with a sexual offense matter in your court, you will need to consider that and take it into account. And I've kept saying, Mr. President, in closing, and I mean it now, that law also, Mr. President, is entangled with our everyday existence, regulating our social relations, controlling conduct which could threaten our safety and security, establishing the rules by which we live and how we deal with matters. And so, Mr. President, that declaration must be a reality for all of us. So we sign it understanding that we mean business and we want action and we are going to demand action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. Despite 3 finalists, Advocate Madumisa did have time. Thank you very much for your speech. Well, it seems you've looked in your bags and you all have your driver's licenses. I hope the person whose license I have doesn't intend to drive after this event, because I will alert the police that I have her license. So it's now my great pleasure to again invite Advocate Masuta, who has the pleasurable privilege of introducing and calling upon the President. Advocate Masuta.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity, Minister Pando. The President does not need introduction. As we all know, much of what he's achieved is well known to all of us. But I do want to inform the President that since he launched the summit during the 16 days of activism against abuse of women and children, we have since, and at the end of this financial year, on Monday, the 1st of April, shall have launched 13 or rolled out 13 new dedicated special sexual offenses court. And that's thanks to the President giving particular focus to this area of our work as the Justice Department. But Mr. President, I also would be remiss if I do not say this, and that is to say, as we celebrate Human Rights Month, we are particularly mindful of the pivotal role that our Constitution and the Bill of Rights in particular plays as the anchor in advancing human rights in our country, and in particular women's rights. And in this regard, and by way of introducing you, let me remind us all of the role that you played in giving birth to the kind of Constitution and Bill of Rights that we celebrate today. And on this note, may I have the pleasure of bringing to you the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Matamela Ramaphosa Cyril, to address you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program Director, Minister Naledi Pandor, Acting Premier of Gauteng, Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, ministers who are here, Minister Masuta, Minister Dlamini, Minister Tulas Nlesi, and deputy ministers who are also here, MECs of our provincial government here in Gauteng, and members of the provincial legislature, members of the judiciary and the magistracy, members of the legal fraternity, representatives of civil society and leaders thereof, leaders of faith-based and religious organizations, members of the Oakdene and Booysens communities, and members of the media, and ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my singular honor and privilege to be here this morning during Human Rights Month to fulfill the promise that our government made to the people of South Africa. We solemnly promise that we will take firm, decisive steps and act very, very swiftly to eradicate gender-based violence and femicide in our society. We have embarked on a journey of doing precisely that in terms of seeking to keep that promise. Right here today, we are turning the tide of doing precisely that. The character of a country can be judged by how that society's most vulnerable people are treated. We have heard the pleas of survivors of gender-based violence that they would like to be treated with respect by our criminal justice system. In opening this new sexual offences court, we are affirming the right of the women and the girls of our country to be treated by the criminal justice system with dignity, with understanding, with compassion, with professionalism and empathy. The opening of the court today, together with the signing of the Declaration Against Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, are two of the measures we have put in place since the presidential summit convened in November of last year. The summit, which was attended by well over 1,200 women from all walks of life, opened the eyes, it also opened the ears, and it even opened the hearts of many of our people to the gravity and the impact of gender-based violence in our country. Since the summit, we have seen the rise of mass-based social movements that has embraced both women and men from across racial, cultural, religious, political, and socio-economic divides. They have been united by one common cause: to see an end to gender-based violence. We've gathered here today as representatives from across society, from women's organizations, from faith-based and community organizations, and from the legal and law enforcement fraternity. As a nation, today we are making a bold and unequivocal declaration that we refuse, as the people of South Africa, to yield to and to accept gender-based violence. This is a practice that must be obliterated from the face of South Africa once and for all. We will not allow it to steadily consume our people, to erode our dreams of a stable and peaceful society in which all have equal rights and opportunities, regardless of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, or even the circumstances of their birth. Today is a special day in that we will be signing the Declaration against gender-based violence and femicide, and by doing so, we are essentially saying, as a collective, that the scourge of women abuse has no place whatsoever in South Africa. And it should have no place also in our homes, in our places of work, in our churches, in our schools, and on the streets of our townships, on the pathways of our villages, and also in our cities and our towns. Human Rights Month gives us cause to reflect on how far we have come as a nation in entrenching a human rights culture across all sectors of society. Our Constitution, as we all know, as well as our Bill of Rights, is one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. It also holds the right to equality, to freedom, to dignity and security of the person amongst its key outstanding aspirations. Yet, for so many of this country's women, these aspirations have not been met. So many of our country's women face a lived reality of harassment, of abuse, and of violence. In essence, our country is facing a national crisis when it comes to this. There is no day that goes past without us hearing harrowing stories of how women have been abused, have been raped, have been killed, and how children have also fallen victim to all those terrible deeds. Our women don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in their homes and on the streets of our country. Rape, abuse, and sexual assault is rampant, often committed by those closest to them. Gender-based violence affects all of us, and it also impacts on all of us, and it impacts on our lives. It extracts a heavy toll on relationships, on families, on communities, on workplaces, on schools, and on our universities and colleges. It breeds fear, suspicion, and other horrible deeds as well in society that still where society still needs to come to terms with all these terrible things that are done against our women and children. I said at last year's presidential summit that there is no acceptable level of gender-based violence. We don't want to bring the figures down. We want to eradicate this evil from our society. We have enacted progressive legislation like the Domestic Violence Act, the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act, the Child Justice Act, and the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, to name but just a few. We need serious introspection as a nation. However, as to why our laws are still failing to adequately protect vulnerable women is something that we need to introspect on. We have to ask why, despite the resources that we have dedicated to combating this problem in the criminal justice system, do survivors feel that our law enforcement system and our courts are victimizing them all over again? Above all, we have to ask whether in advancing our various policies and programs to combat gender-based violence, we are truly adhering to the ethos and the true meaning of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Across a number of other areas of our people's lives, such as access to courts, is something that many people feel they do not have. And yet access to courts is a fundamental human right. It facilitates the protection of our rights as people, such as the right to equality, to privacy, and to dignity. It is therefore fitting that the signing of the declaration is taking place here, where we are launching the 84th dedicated sexual offences court that we have established as a government since 2013. The existence of the court is an indication of higher reporting rates and the confidence from the community that such support services work. Earlier, Advocate Batoi was saying, as head of the NDPP, as the NDPP, was saying we need more and more courts like this one that we see here. And they should not only be in the towns and the cities of our country, but they should also be in the rural areas. And she is absolutely right. Now, the existence of the court is an indication of higher reporting rates and confidence from the community that such support services actually do work. At the same time, the fact that we have over 80 such courts, 84 to be precise, is also an indication of the grave extent of sexual offenses in our country, and it is a sad indictment of our society. Advocate Batoi told me that up to 30% of the cases that they have to deal with as the NPA are offenses that have to deal with abuse of women and children. This is very sad. Here we have established an integrated and comprehensive facility that will provide services to survivors of gender-based violence in several courts: a sexual offences court, domestic violence court, a maintenance court, a children's court, 4 district courts, a civil court, and a regional court. In launching this facility, in other words, this court, we aim to put an end to the secondary victimization of survivors of gender-based violence. According to some research, only 1 in 9 cases of rape are reported in South Africa. This is no small part due to what UNICEF describes as a general lack of confidence in the criminal justice system, but also in the way in which survivors of sexual offenses are treated if and when their cases finally do make it to trial. This court or this facility is geared towards providing a safe and comforting space that protects the rights of the survivors of gender-based violence and also protects their dignity. I was most impressed as I was being shown around the various rooms in this court building to see how even young children will be able to find this facility to be conducive to them being able to give either evidence or testimony in a relaxed and a very conducive atmosphere. This will enable the effective handling of gender-based violence cases to ensure that the victims do finally see justice. Just as we strengthen our ability to arrest and successfully prosecute offenders, we must also intensify the broad range of measures that are required to prevent such violence in the first place. We must make greater use of research and evidence to devise holistic solutions and interventions. We must introduce life skills training for our young people that focuses on building respect in relationships, gender equity, and strengthening communication and other relationship skills. Research has shown that this results in a reduction of intimate partner violence in adolescents. We must strengthen the government funding efforts to focus on criminal enforcement, advocacy for survivors, and building local capacity, because research has shown also that this leads to a decrease in rape statistics. We must support women and girls who seek to obtain temporary restraining orders against their abusers. And we must also increase awareness around dating violence. We must better coordinate our activities as government, between government departments and with civil society as well. We also must focus on improving various criminal justice and social interventions, combined with tracking mechanisms to measure the effectiveness of our responses. The declaration that we are signing here today represents our collective commitment to implement what I would call a comprehensive and effective prevention and response program to end gender-based violence and femicide in our country. Now, through this declaration, we are also affirming that political, government, business, and community leadership should take joint and collective responsibility in ending gender-based violence and femicide. It is, in the end, this cohort of leadership that should be held accountable for actions and omissions that serve as obstacles to achieving the goal of ending the scourge of gender-based violence. We have agreed to establish an interim steering committee with resources. Yes, with resources to establish a permanent multi-sectoral coordinating body and implement actions in this declaration. The interim steering committee, which has already been established, will develop an action plan and the structure of the multi-sectoral steering committee. It will also map the response of services provided for survivors. It will also establish a national rapid response to support survivors and develop guidelines for ethical media reporting as well. The multi-sectoral coordinating body will be championed by the President and governed by a statutory framework. It is significant and necessary that most members of this body will be the members of civil society. Government, on its part, working together with its partners, will review the existing laws as well as policies related to gender-based violence and femicide to determine if they are adequate. And this is where working together is going to have to come to the fore, so that collectively, with organs of civil society, with government, we should be able to look very closely at our existing laws and see whether they still have efficacy and effectiveness in dealing with this scourge. In particular, we will finalize outstanding legislation such as the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill and the Victim Support Services Bill. We will work with all stakeholders to develop policy around the decriminalization of sex work. There is a need for government to investigate harmful religious and cultural practices that lead to the exploitation of women and children. As we establish these structures, we commit ourselves in this declaration to maintain, to resource, to strengthen, and to reinvigorate the existing gender machinery. It is our desire with this declaration to strengthen our country's capacity to produce research and database to inform evidence-based policies, solutions, and programming. And this should bear testimony to the fact that we do not see this declaration as just a piece of paper whose very, very far-reaching interventions are not going to be implemented. We intend to implement what we set out in this declaration. Survivors of gender-based violence need to be treated with fairness, with respect, with dignity, and privacy. We will therefore work to enable communicators and institutions responsible for communication to develop, to adopt, and to execute ethical guidelines of reporting. To prevent gender-based violence requires that we implement social behavior change programs in our communities to tackle patriarchal values and norms. We must target people who can influence attitudes, behaviors, and practices that promote gender-based violence. Through this declaration, we aim to ensure that our economic development model also takes into consideration non-gender conforming people and other marginalized groups, such as people with disabilities. Having regard to the adoption of the summit declaration by the delegates of the Presidential Gender-Based Summit, and having agreed that this declaration is in the end the embodiment of priority actions setting a roadmap to a South Africa free from gender-based violence and femicide, and as envisaged in the National Development Plan, and also having acknowledged that this declaration is an affirmation of intent. Now, we are all sitting here because we want to witness and we want in the end to embrace this declaration that we are going to sign today. Now, in my capacity as the President of the Republic of South Africa, I therefore proclaim that this Presidential Summit Declaration against gender-based violence and femicide is hereby assented to and signed on behalf of the government of the Republic of South Africa. And today begins a new era in our determined struggle to rid our society of gender-based violence and femicide. The commitments made in this declaration are, in the end, compatriots, far-reaching, and will require a great deal of effort. They will also require resources, budgetary resources for that matter, and that is what all of us as a nation need to be aware of. We will require significant resources if we are going to end gender-based violence in our country. But it is also going to require a great deal of cooperation, where we will have to commit ourselves that we are going to work together, where we will go hand in hand, working together and walking together to bring an end to gender-based violence. And I implore all of us to see this as a joint effort, where all of us have our roles to play. And at times when government falters, slows down, we should be on hand to raise the issues with government and get government to step up. And indeed, where various community-based organizations also falter, we will be the first to raise the issue and say we have a huge task ahead of us, and it requires our total commitment. We are determined that we should implement all the resolutions without delay and without fail. Working together, I am certain that we will succeed. I am now at a point, as I stand here, where I am ready, with my pen in hand, to sign this declaration. The question I would ask is that, are we also ready to sign this declaration, but not only to sign, but to adhere to what is set out in this declaration and to see the declaration implemented? That is the question that I pose, because as for me, I am now going to sit on that table and sign the declaration to show our determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The President asked whether we are ready. We are ready. We are ready for Ramaphosa. So please, Mr. President, you'll be led. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you. We thank the President for his profound address. The President will now join the representatives of civil society that I will call out to sign the declaration the President has referred to. The President used the word he's going to assent. This is a very important legal commitment to the standing of the declaration that will be signed. Could I then invite various representatives as follows? Hashtag the total shutdown, Ms. Sibongile Mtembu. And then could I invite, on behalf of Call for Action, Ms. Nonhlanhla Sibanda. Could I invite, on behalf of Gender Links, Ms. Lindiwe Koza. Could I invite, on behalf of the KwaZulu-Natal All right. Oh, I'm advised that we'll do 3 at a time. So I'll call the rest as we continue. Okay. The next group of representatives who will sign are the KZN Network on Violence Against Women, represented by Nizam Edwards, the National Shelter Movement of South Africa, represented by Zubeida Dango, and the Shukumisa Campaign, represented by Shahida Omar. So if those 3 could come forward, please. Could we then have, thank you, could we have the next group? The organizations are Stop Gender-Based Violence Campaign, represented by Rahadi Mutlatlani, the Women Inkwelo Network, represented by Leslie Ann Foster, and the Women on Farms organization, the Women on Farms Project, represented by Rebecca Mort. So if those 3 could come forward. So our congratulations and thanks to all the signatories. Could we give them a round of applause? And we thank the President as well. This is a historic and profound moment in the women's struggle against gender-based violence. It's the first time a president has made such a commitment in South Africa. Thank you very much. All of us must commit to working together and in unity to make this declaration a practical success. Thank you very much to the President. So if the President could return to the table on the stage. I'm now going to invite Minister Bathabile Dlamini. Oh, it's still photo opportunity time. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I see ministers want to take pictures with the President. We had our last cabinet yesterday, so it was our last chance. All right, could I now invite Minister Bathabile Dlamini, who will deliver the vote of thanks on all our behalf. Minister Dlamini, would you come forward, please? Thank you.
Kamala Makhosikazi Malibongwe 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 Kamala Makhosikazi Malibongwe Kamala Makhosikazi Malibongwe, 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 Malibongwe. Mr. President, our program director, the acting premier, Advocate Masuta, the co-conveners of the program of action of the Presidential Summit on Violence Against Women and Femicide, Dr. Olive Shisana and Advocate Brenda Matumisa. Mr. President, I've worked with Brenda in the Women's League. Yes, she worked as a coordinator full-time, and during her time, Women's League members understood the Constitution, but also we had a very strong programs on educating women on the issues of violence against women and children. Minister Tulas, the acting chair of the Gender Commission, Sawit representative, UN Women, UNICEF, the Human Rights Foundation, Comrade Sizagele, I can't not mention you because of the role you've played in fighting violence against women in this province. Civil society organizations, DGs and officials and advisors of government, and the court officials, let me say that because I'm going to bite my tongue. Mr. President, we had a very touching, emotional meeting on the sidelines of the UN with the leadership of the total shutdown. And the meeting was very progressive. And we all agreed that we have to work together fighting gender-based violence and femicide. We also agreed that we are going to need a team, Brenda calls it a think tank, that will be inclusive and try and ensure that no one is left behind in fighting the issues of gender-based violence and femicide. We must also try and ensure that key populations, that's LGBTQIA+, and sex workers are part of our programs. The youngest domestic worker today, Mr. President, is at the range of 19 years. And that means we have a lot of work to do. But one other outstanding thing about us is that we have produced great women, the executive director of UN Women, who kept on supporting us throughout our stay in the UN. The main issue that came out about South Africa is that we are the only country that has non-sexism in the Constitution. And that, Mr. President, must be aligned with programs of fighting gender-based violence, of fighting patriarchy, and ensuring that the criminal justice system is revolutionized. We must ensure that everyone who works in the criminal justice system is trained properly, and not just once. And also, they must respect women, treat them with dignity. One other issue that came up is that as South Africa, our data is not disaggregated, as well as the indicators we are using. They are not enough to come up with a proper information And in some of the areas, like where you report about the cases on violence against women, we only take information from the police and hospitals. There are many women, because of the trust deficit between government and civil society, that prefer to report to civil society organizations. And we must find a proper way of including information from civil society organizations so that we fight the animal we understand. And we've not been part of some of the analysis that is done by the UN Women and the UN because of our data and indicators. Mr. President, last night I spoke to Thabo Ngwadla, the brother to Busisiwe Ngwadla. Busisiwe was stabbed by her so-called boyfriend. And he informed me about the situation at home since the passing on of Busisiwe. It's a sad situation, but also what made me have hope was that he said, Minister, we are going to work with all women's organizations. The case or the man is appearing in court on Monday. Thank you, Minister Begicele, for responding to the family. And we hope that the case is not going to be like the case of Babes, who Babes' partner was arrested, taken to court, 2,000 rand bail, and that means the value of women is 2,000 rands. There are many other cases that have exonerated men and have put women into trouble. And fortunately, men have always definitions for things they do. For instance, we have a definition for femicide. And then violence that is done by men is not properly defined. And at all times, women lose the cases when they kill their partners in defense of their lives. Mr. President, what is happening in the so-called sacred places must be dealt with decisively. There is an urgent need for government and civil society to invest in young women, because also countries that reported progress economically at the UN are those that protect the rights of women. We are 51% of the population, and therefore, if we want to see progress and development in our country, women must feel safe and they must participate in all spheres of government. No country can realize development without recognizing women. Mr. President, we hope you are going to make sense to other leaders. They are going to buy into this program of action so that we all ensure that women and children are safe. And we hope that this time there will be proper policies to implement what is in the declaration, There will be a proper responsive budgeting that can be audited, but before that, you need to plan properly, have monitoring instruments and evaluation instruments so that we measure everyone equally. We must be able to legislate and implement all decisions that are about the development of women. Thank you, everyone, for attending this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for that energy. I think it has kept us going this morning. I would like to thank Minister Dlamini for her very powerful address, and also thank the President for the profound comments that he made during his address. The commitments are strong commitments, and as Minister Dlamini has said, we look forward to their implementation. Mr. President, I've committed a grave error, which I suspected I would, which is failure in diplomacy. We have the ambassador of the Netherlands here, as well as the ambassador of Ireland, and I did not recognize either of them. So welcome to you both. And of course, the representative of UN Women, our most senior representatives, and all other representatives of international missions that are present in this meeting today. I wish to thank all the women and leaders in civil society organizations who have led the struggle that has got us to this point. I should also congratulate Minister Masuta and Minister Nglesi on giving us a court on time and in budget for such an important area of negative social action. We wish all who will work within it the wisdom and the ability to help us in this fight against the scourge of gender-based violence, which is such a terrible scar in our society. So we thank each and every one of you for being present here today. We shall allow the President and his guests to leave the marquee and proceed back to the court. We will get further instructions as to what will happen next. I also am pleased that we now have a legal driver. The owner of the license came to claim her license, and so I don't have to report to the SAPS at all. Thank you very much for your kind attention and participation. Could I ask you then to stand as the President and his guests depart, and further announcements will be made by the organizers. Thank you very much to each and every one of you.